It's a big week around the InGoal magazine headquarters as IG Radio is officially legal as we celebrate episode 21 of the podcast that, thanks to you, has become an essential diet of goaltenders, goalie parents, coaches, and those just looking to add to their knowledge base. Welcome back, and yes, thank you for subscribing. I'm your host, Darren Millard. Presented by The Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. This is InGoal Radio, the podcast. Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison are the brains of the operation, and while we're on the topic of brilliant minds, sports psychologist John Stevenson will join InGoal Radio today. John has most notably worked with Braden, Holtby, and Carter Hart. You may recall hearing his name last week as we discussed the now famous draft combine question. Do you like to stop pucks or prevent goals? Something along that line. Today, John will give you a deeper understanding of the mental side of the game. That discussion with InGoal co-founders David Hutchison and the aforementioned Kevin Woodley, who slide into position. Gentlemen, you guys are fresh off respective trips to Calgary, and you get to chat with one of the great mental coaches in the game. Welcome to episode 21. We're growing up nice and fast. How was your trip, Woody, to Calgary?
It was good. It was really good. Had an opportunity to go be a part I guess the official title is goalie consultant or goaltending consultant of the Hockey Canada Program of Excellence Camp. So the best and brightest, or at least what they believe to be the best and brightest of young goaltenders in Canada for the World Junior team this year, for the under 18 team. There's under 17 group, 26 goaltenders in total on the ice for 4 days. It was amazing. Not just the goaltenders and getting to watch them, but getting to know the coaches. Some really good coaches, some former players, and some really good stories. And in addition to good coaches, some guys that played in the league and shared some really good stories that we'll bring to you next week. Danny Sabarin walks us through firsthand the Luongo bathroom break for the 2007 playoffs and what it was like to be there when Lou turned around and said, "No, I gotta go." So we'll bring that to you. We'll save that one for next week. Jason LaBarbera was there. He had some great stories about how helicoptering a stick down the hallway ultimately led him from the East Coast Hockey League to his first NHL call-up. Freddie Brathwaite caught up with him. We'll have him in a in a round table hot stove type format, and we'll also do a longer one with him. So some great conversations about goaltending. Goalie coaches Lyle Mast, Dustin Schwartz of the Edmonton Oilers, Charlie McTavish, Paul Drew. I'm cramping on all the names right now because I'm an idiot.
Freddie Brathwaite.
Well, Fred Brathwaite we had. James Jensen from the Everett Silvertips was there. Obviously,
Who drove the Zamboni?
I have no idea.
Well, if you're going to run down everybody, you got to give me the guy that's working the machine.
Matt Weninger from Alberta was not driving the Zamboni from Hockey Alberta. He was there as a coach. I've probably forgotten someone, and I'm absolutely going to kick myself. But I got to be honest with you, the Zamboni drivers were the heroes because you watch goaltenders, and we some big boys. Alex Gravel, just fresh off the Memorial Cup, was there. Hunter Jones, who's going to be in this draft coming up, pretty big-bodied goaltender. They get it down to the studs. You get goalies out there for an hour and a half going through creases. And the National Women's Camp was running at the same time. So we would basically chop the crap out of all the creases, and they had 2 at the sides. And then we'd get off the ice, lay a bunch of slush down, and they had to get that sheet back and ready and those creases back and ready for the women's after us, or vice versa. So I may not know the name of the Zamboni driver, but I can tell you right now they were probably the true heroes of the whole thing.
And you guys weren't in Calgary together. That's the strange part to me.
We were close. We were close. Yeah, just accidentally. I got to go there for a couple of different reasons. Was a guest of Eli Wilson, who we do a bit of work with, and he was visiting Goalie Palooza, which is put on by Pro Skate Goal in Calgary, and it's very similar to the Tendy Fest event that we've talked about many times on here. Similar sort of arrangement. With one difference, the ice times are run by goalie coaches. And so Eli had a 2-hour ice slot he was running, and I was there doing some photography and flying the InGoal flag at the same time. And we're good friends of the folks at Pro Skate Goal and Peter Martin, who runs the shop. We've known him through the Day with Carey Price and Eli every summer. Eli was going into Calgary because he's going to be beginning a winter training program there for goaltenders in the Calgary area, and just wanted to touch base with the market. And it was a fantastic event. And it just turns out that it was in the exact same building that Kevin was in with the Hockey Canada folks. So I got to spend a little bit of time watching those ice sessions, watching Kevin run around on the ice with his cameras, and sitting in the stands talking to a few of the scouts that were there on hand. And it was fascinating. A number of scouts from NHL teams were there, as you might imagine. Two things struck me. One was that they were really just there on their own, like independent citizens like us walking into the building. They weren't there invited by Hockey Canada or supported in any way. They just know that the event's on, and they hop into the building, and that kind of surprised me a little bit. And just being able to talk to them and see how their eyes were opened up. I mean, we're pretty late into the draft cycle here, with the drafts just a couple weeks away. And I know that their eyes were getting opened up by a number of the goaltenders on the ice that weren't necessarily on their list, and were making their way onto their list because they, perhaps in some of the drills, were eclipsing some of the guys that are a little bit better known. So fascinating to see the whole process. Not quite firsthand, but pretty close.
Now, did you break anything like apparently Woody did? Explain that, Woody.
When you
couple of cameras went down?
Yeah, when you have cameras on the ice, trying to get puck perspective video for use in a curriculum that they're building for Hockey Canada, they're at risk. I mean, some of the shooters that we had out there are guys that have been drafted. Dylan Dubé was out there as a shooter of the Calgary Flames. There were guys who were out there that are going to be drafted soon. I remember a couple of years ago, actually, one of the shooters at the camp was Cale Makar. So there's pucks flying around. Some of them are coming hot off pads, especially those Bauer pads, just rocketing off. And one shot missed the net, caught my camera, and it was just like a massive explosion of plastic and metal, just kind of flying everywhere. The good news was two parts. Again, for the Zamboni guy, he keeps coming up, whoever he is. I managed to get all the small pieces off the ice and didn't kill a Zamboni by leaving any behind. Two, I actually managed to put most of those pieces back together, and it turns out most of the damage wasn't the camera itself. It was actually just the unique little tripod setup that I had there in the holder and the case. So relatively unscathed, and actually managed to get her back working on the ice for a little puck perspective video on the final day. So all was not lost, despite a rather spectacular explosion and a lot of giggles from shooters who I would have, quite frankly, liked to strangle at that point.
Is there a good video coming? Is there a good first person video of this camera getting exploded?
That's actually a really good point. I should probably get through that footage, but as you can imagine, Hutch, with 6 cameras on the ice, 4 stations, every hour and a half of ice time, basically becomes 9 hours of footage. Multiply that by 2 a day, and I've got a fair amount of video to go through. So we're not quite there yet. Let's put it that way. But I will eventually get there, and there will be the one. Actually, that's not a good one because that one came from behind. That was another station. So the guy he was filming was not who blew it up, which is too bad.
We still get it falling on its face.
Yeah. It'll be spectacular. It'll be violent. The best ones are when the puck goes right at the camera and you capture that. I've got a few of those. We've run those on
Old
Instagram.
Eddie Lackhorn, yeah.
Yeah, and Braden Holtby too, where it comes off and boom, right into the camera.
You know what the real explanation there is, Hutch, is loop back and ask that question in episode 242. And he might get around to watching that video with all the camera work. Just a quick story. You talked about the Zamboni and the small pieces. I once played in a rink where the plexiglass exploded, and instead of shoveling it, they brought out the Zamboni and tried to clean it up. Oh. And that did not work out very well for the machine.
Oh my God.
Don't do that at home, folks, but it was pretty funny to watch.
Okay, listen, just because I am an idiot and now my brain is actually working, I actually forgot Scott Murray of the Stanley Cup champion Washington Capitals was there and gave a heck of a presentation that basically broke down how tracking and the sort of this new way of looking at tracking essentially helped the Capitals win a cup with numbers, statistical evidence and specific examples of the type of movement patterns that they changed in Braden Holtby, and examples of saves he wasn't making at the beginning of the season that he made in the cup run, important saves that led them to a championship. That was a great presentation. I mentioned Dustin Schwartz was there already, Sabrin, Mass, DiPietro, Brathwaite, Matt Weninger, Paul Drew, I mentioned, from Charlottetown in the Q, James Jensen from Everett, Charlie McTavish from Ottawa. I missed, and I had LaBarbera, but I missed Adam Brown from the Kelowna Rockets of the Western Hockey League as well, which was a huge omission by me. Really enjoyed. It's the son of Newell Brown, Canucks assistant coach, and really enjoyed watching him coach and looking forward to going through the video because like I said, just really enjoyed sort of listening to his conversations and watching his stations over the course of the week.
And we've got that great roundtable with those goalie coaches coming up next week, episode 22 of InGoal Radio, the podcast. While Woody's looking for some new gear, camera-wise, if you're looking for some new gear on the goaltending front, you check out the Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com, source for sports in Surrey. We welcome Cam back this week for his gear specific segment, a couple of fun manufacturer-focused interviews from Tendy Fest the last couple of weeks. So Cam's been off, but he's back on talking about some steel this week, Woody.
Yeah, I think it ties in quite nicely to our conversation with John Stevenson on the mental side, to be honest with you, because I think the mental side, we hear goalies say 90% of the game is mental, and yet they probably spend 5% focusing on it. And so interesting that Cam decided this would be a good week to talk about steel and replacement blades and some of your options, because I do think as goaltenders, we tend to spend a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort looking at our equipment, our pads, our gloves, our blockers, our masks, chest protectors. And yet, in an era where skating's never been more important heading into the draft, all these goalie coaches there would tell you that it's all about how they move. That connection to the ice may be the most important piece of your equipment. And much like the mental training, I think it's often overlooked. So a good segment with Cam sort of walking us through it. And another example of why we've teamed up with the Hockey Shop, source for sports in Surrey, to bring you the InGoal Radio podcast, because they have guys like Cam working in the store, in person, guys that understand the position, guys that know it's not just about buying whatever's on the rack, whatever steel it comes with. There are options, and those options can affect and will affect how you play. They carry all the best brands. They have a huge selection. We've talked about it before. It's every goalie's dream, the basement, the bottom floor, the goalie sort of heaven at the Hockey Shop, source for sports in Surrey. Of course, not everybody is as lucky as me. They can't go into the store and visit them and say hi to Cam in person. So for all those goaltenders out there, make sure you check it out online at thehockeyshop.com. They've got a great staff, like I said, not just guys. They just hiring kids out of high school. Everybody in the goalie department plays the position, is passionate about the position, understands the position, and most importantly, understands how equipment will affect how you play the position. So make sure you check them out, the Hockey Shop, source for sports in Surrey, and thehockeyshop.com.
Cam is coming up, and from the physical to the mental side of the game. Last week, we had a spirited debate on the relevance of a question asked of a goaltending prospect at the NHL Draft Combine. That one about, do you like stopping pucks or do you prevent goals? I was on the side that it was of little use, that question. David was opposite me. Kevin, like he does, he wanders in between.
My hockey team has officially informed me I do neither, for the record.
But that conversation was really involved three laymen. What about the area that created the query, the psychologist's opinion? John Stevenson is a mental skills coach. He comes to the table with a PhD in psychology, a registered psychologist, the perfect person to spend some time with Hutch and Woody. This is a person that's worked with Braden Holtby and Carter Hart. He may work between the ears primarily, but he started this journey with goaltenders talking stick on the ice and the glove up. A goalie coach turned master of the mental. John Stevenson with Woody and Hutch on InGoal Radio, the podcast.
John, I guess the first question that I wanted to ask you is how you made the transition. Like, how did you end up in this position, working with some of the biggest names in goaltending on the mental side? I mean, we know the relationship with Braden started as a goalie coach, But how did you go from being a goalie coach to being a sports psychologist, or maybe specializing in goaltending is the wrong word because you work with so many people, but how did this transition, how did this start?
Well, it's funny because even when I was doing my goalie school, I would do technical training, and I still wasn't getting the results that I wanted. Like I'd be working on their shuffling or, working on their recovery, and then only to realize that they weren't doing anything with regards to dry land training. Like they weren't making their legs or their core stronger. So then with my goalie school, I added the physical, training part. And then I started to quickly realize, I'd be doing that. I'd do the technical, do the physical, and parents and kids would come back and, he's still not performing well. And then it was like, well, let's watch some game film. And then I'd watch the game film, and then only to, quickly realize that a lot of the kids had never been taught how to read the play and the anticipation skills. And so then we did that. And then all of a sudden it was like, I'm watching the game film, and next thing you know, I'm seeing that, no one had ever mentioned about, how to get ready, physically and mentally for the game. Or I'd see a goalie, for a lack of a better term, lose their mind in the middle of a game, and they'd never been taught, skills to refocus and regroup. And so it was kind of an evolution that, and then the most recent thing is here I see all these kids going to their technical or dry land, but then their sleep is terrible. Or they, like Braden, I was just in Washington last week, and one of the, I had spent the weekend with Braden, and I didn't even realize this, but on game day, Braden has almost 17 liters of water, and that was a big issue for him, and so I started to realize, even in the last few years, the amount of kids that are doing Fortnite and Minecraft and all this gaming and all this YouTubing. And I started to realize, like, you could do all the mental training in the world, but if their diet and their sleep and all these other lifestyle issues that I call it, so for me, it's kind of been an evolution where all these different, I call it the performance wheel. I literally draw it like a circle with each of these four components, and then the hub being the lifestyle. And just over time, like I used to, if I saw a tracking issue, here I would be thinking, Kevin, like it's a real, I'm going to really work on their tracking. I'll bring out the white pucks. I'll bring out the mesh bags. And meanwhile, it could have been an issue that was off ice that had nothing to do with their technical part of the game. And so I feel like I without sounding arrogant, I almost feel like I'm a better goalie coach now, even though I don't do the technical part, but it's because I'm looking at all of the different areas of their goaltending career.
So what can you walk us through? Like, what if you had a new client come to you now, John? Like, what would be the approach? How would you break it down? What would be the focus for them to kind of help them build that wheel? Is it all encompassing? Just walk us through. If I walked in, well, I mean, I'm snaptastic, and Hutch and Darren like to have a little fun with my tendency to maybe go, full Tuukka-esque back in the milk crate throwing days. But if someone in general was a little more stable than I am came in, how would you start working with them? What kind of a focus would you start with?
Well, the very, very first session, whether it's a forward, defenseman, or goalie, I look at what I call the mindset, and then we talk about the skill set. But the mindset is literally looking at that performance wheel. So I draw up the circle and I say, okay, we have our physical skills, we have our technical skills, we have our tactical, we have our mental skills. And that's what I call the 7 C's of mental toughness: concentration, composure, consistency, confidence, commitment, coachability, and then the lifestyle. And literally my first definition of mental toughness is, this may sound harsh, but you got to get honest. And where do you suck? I mean, if your core is not good, then we go so I literally, if I had a goalie in my office and I said, okay, if I phone up your dry land training coach right now, where would they say you need to get better? And if I phoned up your goalie coach right now, where would you need to get better? And then if we're watching game film, how well are you reading the play? So the very first session is we literally go over each of these components. Like somebody sitting across from me, how much water have you had today? And how many hours of sleep? So we literally go, that's the first mindset, because a lot of right now, most of the goalies in Canada are doing what I call the top two quadrants. They're working on the physical part of the game and they're working on the technical. But they don't even know. A lot of the kids have never even been taught that you can really work on the tactical part of your game and you can work on the mental. And so that's the first thing that I talk about. And then the second mindset is what I call the high performance equation. And I learned this from a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jacques Dallaire. And it basically goes like this: A times B equals C. And A is your A game. It's everything that you have 100% control over that allows you to stop the puck. So basically, what are all the things that you're going to do on and off the ice to stop the puck? The B factor in the equation is all of the uncontrollables, all of the things that you don't have direct control over. And then C is the results. And the first thing that I do is I get kids to look at their season. And, where have you been directing most of your energy? And I literally put a box around A times B equals C for each component. And, I always tell the story, like if you look at Carter Hart when he broke all those records in the Western Hockey League, at any point in time, if you ever asked him what his stats were, and it's true, and I mean really sincerely, he has no idea and he doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't care, but that's not his focus. He keeps his focus on his A game. And it's amazing how many goalies, when I break it down in that area, like where, if you evaluate your season, because my second definition of mental toughness is what you choose to focus on. And if you've been spending the vast majority of your season focusing on the uncontrollables or focusing on your results, and if over, I always joke about this, but when you're performing well, your focus is good. And when you're performing poorly, your focus is even better. But if your focus has been on the uncontrollables or results, well, then clearly your focus hasn't been on your A game. And that's the first starting point, is really helping goalies to become more self-aware. These are the key things that we need to be focusing on to develop our A game, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. John, I don't want to wind things too far back here, but not everybody's going to be familiar with you. And I think if I was brand new listening to this story, I might hear John Stevenson was a goaltending coach who got interested in the mental side of the game. But you've got formal training in this area, don't you?
Yeah, so when I was at St. FX, St. Francis Xavier University, that's where I did my Bachelor of Arts and my Bachelor of Science. And then that's where I played my hockey. And then when I went to York University to do my sports psychology degree, that's where I became the goalie coach for the York Yeomen. And then when I came back home and I did my PhD at the U of A, that's where I was the goalie coach for the U of A Golden Bears. So I'd always combined. I did not want to be a researcher. And, a lot of the schools in Canada in sports psych are very research orientated, but I wanted to, work with athletes. And because I was a goalie, and I tried to combine both of those worlds. So I've been doing this for a long time. And even at my goalie school, if Braden Holtby was here the first time in Argyle Arena in Edmonton, there he is lying on the floor inside a dressing room arena doing progressive muscle relaxation to learn how to control the tension in his muscles. So we've been doing this, or I've been doing it for a long time. And I think that was one of the things that I tried to make my goalie school very different, is that when kids would come to camp, we devoted at least an hour and a half of that day towards mental training. So the Carters and the Bradens, that's how they got introduced to it. Like, it was just another part of their training. It wasn't an adjunct. It was literally, okay, we're doing our ball drills to work on our vision training. Well, we're doing our mental training. We're going to do work on breathing and progressive muscle relaxation and pregame routine. It was just another facet. So they never looked at it as a separate component, if that makes sense.
Does it surprise you, John? Like, you talk about the top two components, training, goalie specific off ice training and trainers, Obviously, goalie coaching is at a level it's never been before. There are just, lots of kids with multiple options, multiple coaches. We've seen the vision training come to the forefront. A lot more talk about it, driven probably in part by guys like Braden, Holtby, and Carter Hart, clients of yours. We see them spray the water bottle, and then people ask the questions and they explain it. And so more and more kids get into the vision side. It seems to me, and I'm wondering if you see the same, that the mental side, for the most part, we're not seeing the same commitment of resources from young goalies, and maybe even, you correct me if I'm wrong, maybe even some pros, in terms of, they'll always say the game's 95% mental, but I'm not sure the amount of energy spent in terms of training it matches that.
Well, I totally agree with you. And I think if you asked any hockey player right now, what did you do today to work on your mental game? Just like if you went to your dryland training coach, he's going to give you several drills and exercises to work on your core. But a lot of hockey players and then goalies, like if you ask them, okay, what are some specific exercises that you do to work on developing your focus? What are some of the specific exercises that you do to develop your confidence? And they don't know. And so they literally do not know where the rubber meets the road. Like a simple drill, like doing 3, 4, 5 ball juggling, how much it can work on multiple object processing, which is what goaltending is. But they don't know, like the specific, I get this question all the time. I've got this 8-year-old, 9-year-old boy or daughter. Would it be worthwhile to, for them to come and see you? And I'm like, absolutely, because we can give them practical, tangible exercises that they can do. And I just think a lot of people, they're not aware of that. And that's what we're trying to do, is really educate people that, right from the get-go, they can do certain exercises to really work on developing their mental side of their game.
And is that the great separator? I mean, as we look at pros and we see that the difference between the good and the great is such a fine line, how much of it to you really is the mental side?
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, tomorrow night, right? If you look at all the best goalies in the National Hockey League, everybody can stop a puck. Everybody can make a blocker save. It's, when you get into this, is, the finals of the Stanley Cup, that's where I think that, that self-belief that you can really make a difference, that you, in some ways, you can single-handedly win the game. That's something that I definitely believe, it can make the difference in, whether you win a Stanley Cup or not. I go back to last year. A lot of people forget about this, that Braden Holtby did not start the Stanley Cup playoffs. He was sitting on the bench for the first 2 games. And the amount of guys that would get rattled by that, where Braden just kept his focus on himself and his training, so that if he did get the call, he was mentally ready to go. And there's so many guys at the pro level where they get rattled by the management, and they let that derail them. And that's one of the reasons why they never, come out of the coast, or they never come out of the American Hockey League. And the guys that have that mental resiliency, no matter what the management or, does, they just keep developing. They keep their focus on what they need to do on and off the ice to stop more pucks. And I mean, look at the goalie for the St. Louis Blues. He's a really good example. And, and just think about all the expectations that are going to be placed upon him next year, whether they win or not. There's going to be that, is there going to be a sophomore jinx or anything like that? And so how do you deal with these expectations that people place upon you? And I think that's where mental training can really make a big difference.
Can you give us an example, without giving too much away, of, a method that you might teach somebody to just to give us a little anecdote, or that you have worked with, whether it's a pro or a kid on how you manage something like expectations after a big year, or how you manage a pressure situation like a Game 7? Or is it just simply a matter, John, of doing the same things you've done in terms of mental focus on a game in, game out basis, and not changing them in big moments?
That's exactly it. It's you over the years, you hear these goalies, and it sounds cliche, but they, like I always joke that the puck doesn't know that it's a big game. The goalposts don't know that it's a big game. The ice surface doesn't know that it's a big game. You literally, bring your routine. You bring your pregame routine. You bring your routines that you use in the game to help you to stay more in the moment, to be more present. And the guys that, like, a simple exercise of a big proponent of my practice is mindfulness, where, you're using the breath, not as a calming tool. A lot of people think that the breath is used to calm down. I don't use that at all. Like, I use it as a way of learning how to be in the moment. Like, you can't feel the sensations of your breath in the past. You can't feel the sensations of your breath in the future. You can only feel your breath in the moment. And a simple exercise of, going to your mental gym every day and doing this mindfulness meditation is one way of learning how to stay in the moment, to stay present and not get, too ahead of yourself, with regards to, the upcoming season. And if a young, and this could be taught to 7 and 8 year old goalies, and it's, like you look at someone like Carter, who's been, and Nick Schneider. I mean, these are guys that I've been working with for a long time, and they've been doing this now for almost 10 years, 11 years. So where they, whether it's 5 minutes or 45 minutes every day, they go to their mental gym. That's how they get really consistently good at this. So they learn to deal with what I call those uncontrollables, those B factors.
So can you take us back to that relationship with Carter Hart, who you just brought up? When did you start working with him? What was he like as a kid, and how much have you progressed with him over the years?
Oh boy, Carter, we were talking about this. I'm actually going out for lunch with him tomorrow. And I'm going to pick his brain about his experience over, playing in the World Hockey Championships. And as much as I think I like to teach these guys, I learn a lot from them. I never played in the Stanley Cup Finals, and I've never played in the World Hockey Championships. So, Braden and Carter and a lot of these guys have been such a great resource for me because they share their experiences, and then I can learn from them and then pass it on to the younger goalies. I think I started with Carter when he was 9. My first impression with Carter, just unbelievable work ethic, very coachable, very open to ideas. I remember when I ran my goalie school in Sherwood Park, we do these week-long camps, and usually, the camp usually started at 7:30 in the morning, and I would arrive at the rink at 6:30 in the morning to get ready for the day. And there's Carter Hart throwing balls against the wall. He's the first kid, doing all these ball drills that we taught. And he just really wanted to be the best that he could be. And I know that sounds cliche, but just real hungry to learn different drills with puck handling, with tracking. And he's just a very open-minded kid. And he's taken a lot of the skills from Dustin Schwartz and his goalie coaches, in Philadelphia, and his goalie coach in Everett, and just been open to hear different things. I mean, even this year, he would tell you the biggest change that he made that really made a big difference in his game was radically changing his diet. And that made a huge impact. And he's just, that's one of the qualities. He's got a phenomenal work ethic, very open, very coachable. These are these C's, and he parks his ego. That's one thing he does, is he parks his ego, and he tries to, take different, even like with some of the veterans with the Philadelphia Flyers this year, just being open to hear some different suggestions from the veterans in terms of, getting used to playing in the league. And that's what makes him so special.
You said, I think the term you used was mental toolbox. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but what is that? What does that look like? And is it different for every guy?
Well, I call it the 7 C's, so one of the C's that I just literally came up with in the last few months is compassion. It's amazing how many goalies, if they have a tough game, I mean, look at our goalie for St. Louis, where, he had that tough game where, he had 5 goals on, I think, 18 shots, and how he was able to just to let that go and be kind to himself and get himself ready for that next game. And everybody's a little bit different in that Some goalies need to develop their focus more. Other goalies need to develop their consistency more. Other goalies need to work on, mental rehearsal, or as Pete Fry would call it, visualization. So when people come in, I introduce these 7 C's, and then we look at, what's the one that really, like, a lot of goalies, this is a common one. A lot of goalies have a real hard time letting go of a goal, or a bad game. And so that's, another skill. Like, so when we go to that, the mental gym, they've got these key skills that they're working on every day to work on developing and honing those skills. And everybody's going to be a little bit different. Like, I call it hype numbers, 0 being asleep and 10 being you've had 900 Red Bull. Some goalies need to be more pumped up. Other goalies need to be more calmer. And what they do is they start to find out what works best for them. And that's why it's so important. I tell goalies never to compare yourself to other goalies. I mean, go to goalie schools and listen to different goalie coaches, and listen to different ideas. But at the end of the day, you can, take things from different guys. Like Carter took, different things from Braden Holtby. He took different things from Carey Price, and he's just incorporated it into his game. I know he got some stuff from Matt Murray here recently, but at the end of the day, he ends up being himself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So I wonder if we could maybe get you to respond to a few typical questions we might have from some parents or kids. And first one that comes to mind that I've seen a few times is, my young son gets way too angry on the ice and smashing his stick after goals. What can I say to him? What can we do?
Well, the first thing is, like, that's a great thing, believe it or not, because that tells me that he cares and that he wants to make a difference. It's how do we learn how to manage that energy more effectively? So we're not trying to get rid of it. Like, anger, like, to me, there's no such thing as negative emotions. If we can use it rather than letting it use us. So the first thing is just helping them understand that a puck that crosses the goal line is just a puck that crosses the goal line. It has no meaning. And so it's helping the kids to understand how much their thinking affects their perception and their emotional control. So we start off, like Braden, I know would probably, he would allow me to talk about this, but that was Braden's biggest issue. And I told Braden, I can give you all the relaxation tools in the world, but that's not going to make a difference if you have this belief that, you strive for perfection, but don't expect it. And if you think that everything is always going to go perfectly, on the ice, then you're going to get frustrated every game. So, I call it the 3 R's: recognize, regroup, and refocus. So it's helping the kids to understand that the best goalies in the world make the most mistakes. I mean, Carter Hart, his first junior camp, he went to the Sherwood Park Crusaders when he was 13 years old. And, when he finished that camp, he said, "Johnny, I got lit up like a Christmas tree, but boy, did I ever learn a lot and things that I need to work on." And that's the mindset that you want to have, that, when you're going to these, elite camps, you're gonna get scored on. If you got a better shooter, you're gonna get scored on. And having that mindset that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel nervous, but being able to learn how to use these emotions in a positive way.
Fantastic. Now, how about dealing with a coach that's putting pressure on a kid? I mean, how many coaches say, "Well, we're down by 2. Now you really need to shut the door here," as if I was going to let the goal in before. How does a kid deal with that pressure from a coach? You really need to step it up here.
Well, the first step is just awareness again. Again, that's an uncontrollable. And, what the coach does or says has nothing to do with your job. It's the, and the first thing we talk about, and you guys know Coach Belichick. Famous quote from Coach Belichick for the New England Patriots is, "Know your job, do your job, enjoy your job." And the first step is just recognizing that the coach has nothing to do with what you need to do on the ice. And that's where a lot of kids, whether the coach decides to play you or not, that has nothing to do, this happened this year. Nick Schneider is playing for the Stockton Heat. He's playing against the Oilers farm team. He's the first star in the game. I think they got outshot that night, like 55-15. And I text messaged him, to say congratulations on a great performance. They happened to lose that game that night 2-1. And then Nick sends me a message saying that he just got sent down to the East Coast. Well, the following day, guess who was the first guy on the ice working with his goalie coach in Kansas City? And so that's the difference. It's just, first of all, recognizing that you don't have control over an uncontrollable, but you definitely have control over how you choose to respond to it. And that's what Nick has learned over the years. It's the old famous phrase, control the controllables. I mean, I could tell you thousands of stories of, Kevin Constantine, what he tried to do with Carter, and Carter just realized, like, at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with what I need to do to get ready for the next game, no matter what the coach does or says.
Okay. So it sort of sounds to me, John, if we get away from this for a little bit, that you're more than a mental skills coach. You're more than a goaltending coach. It sounds really like you're a life skills coach for goaltenders.
Well, I'm a big believer that goaltending is what you do, but it's not who you are. And you really, really, I'm torn with spring hockey because I get it. I know that, the caliber of hockey tends to be better, but I think it's really important that when you're away from the game, you are literally away from the game. And I can't emphasize, like, at this time of year, now kids need to, they're doing their training, but then they got to just go be a kid. And, Braden and I were talking last week and how important music is to him and how important just being with his family and spending that quality time. And believe it or not, that actually makes you a better goaltender. But I think it's really important that kids, all my clients, I really emphasize you got to get away from the game and you got to start to discover, who you are as a person and what's important and who are the people that are important in your life. And a lot of these 7 C's, like, as much as Nick has had a great year as a first-year pro, I still think Nick would be most proud that, Nick suffered a pretty traumatic brain injury when he was younger, and he was told that he may not get his driver's license. And a lot of the training that we've done with him, whether it be the vision training or the neurofeedback, he got his driver's license. And I could tell you right now, that's one of the proudest moments in his life. He came in and just, was barrel tackled me that day. And that was just an amazing moment for Nick to see how much pride he had in getting his driver's license. So absolutely, a lot of these skills you can use in, writing an exam or try to get your driver's license or just, daily life, dealing with things that can be stressful.
And that's, of course, Nick Schneider, Calgary Flames goalie prospect. John, you've teamed up. I wanted to ask you, like, how much of this stuff do you or can you present in a sort of tangible takeaway fashion? You've teamed up with Pete Fry. You guys have a one-day seminar coming up, starting here in Vancouver, June 22nd, 23rd, but then moving across the country. The dates are all at the website, and we'll give out that information later. But, like, what kind of takeaways in a seminar environment versus a one-on-one session? Because there's probably going to be a lot of goalies and goalie parents listening to this that'll be like, man, he's right. I need to work on this, or this is something maybe we should be investing in. What kind of takeaways would they get out of that one-day seminar thing versus, being able to sort of work with you one-on-one in Edmonton?
Well, I think just right off the bat, again, what we talked about is this is not going to be a sitting down presentation. Pete and I, we're going to be having the clients that come to the workshop in doing mode, experiential. So they'll be doing a lot of the skills, like literally we're going to guide them through, skills like mindfulness and heart rate variability training and visualization. So they're going to walk away out of there, like the vision, all the ball drills. Like, I was very lucky when I was very young. I went to Batislav Tretiak School, and every ball drill that my goalies use for pregame and pre-practice routine, they're going to learn those that day. So absolutely, like, this is I'd be lying to say that, this is a jump start. This is to show people these are the types of things that you can do. And then if people want to pursue doing more individual training with Pete or I, then there's that opportunity. But this is really to introduce people to an area that I think that a lot of people don't have no idea of. These are the types of things that you can do to really separate yourself come fall when you're in tryouts.
Actually, and I love that word, workshop versus seminar, because they really are two different things, I think, in people's minds. So it sounds like a lot more hands-on. I wanted to get back quickly to the vision and ball drills, because I think you've mentioned it a couple of times. Vision is something that, I said, I think a lot of goalies they've been turned on to. We see a lot of goalies juggling and throwing balls off wall. And I think, even me personally, I always thought of it as, warming up your eye-hand coordination, so to speak. But multiple object tracking and juggling, can you explain to us how that is not just about eye-hand, but more about or as much about the mental side of the game for goaltenders?
Well, when we talk about focus, it's the two things. It's what to focus on and then the actual skill of how to focus. Well, if a play's coming down on you, it's amazing how many goalies have been taught to just keep their eye on the puck. They've never been taught the odd even rule. They've never been taught to look off the puck. They've never been taught that it's critical to recognize which way the open man is shooting. If I said to Braden, okay, you're playing against Toronto Maple Leafs, who are their 5 top players, which way do they shoot, and what are their habits? Braden can tell me in a heartbeat. And if I ask most kids, at amateur hockey, okay, who are pick a team, okay, who are their 5 top players? They have no idea. And that leads into mental preparation. So this is where your mental rehearsal, your visualization, and doing 5-ball juggling, because there's 5 guys on the ice. Well, now what you're doing is you're developing your brain processing speed. You're developing your peripheral awareness. So you're literally reading and seeing the play at faster and faster levels. And, just like you're doing your physical warm up, when you do these ball and vision exercises, you're literally warming up your eyes and your brain so that you're and a lot of goalies too, like even when they get taught this, sometimes they make the big mistake of only doing it in games rather than treating your practice just like a game. And so all my clients, I want them, they might have what I call a mini me version of it. Like you're doing the same exercises, but just maybe not doing it at the same extent that you would do for a game. But you're mentally warming up the brain, just like you're, physically warming up the body.
When you mention things like multiple object tracking, obviously I cover the Canucks, or that's been part of my job here for 20 years. And it automatically makes me think of, I think it was called the neurotrainer that they brought in. They had their quote unquote mind room. They're pretty ahead of the time under Mike Gills's direction in terms of a sports science background. Have you ever worked with those types of tools? Do you find that those can be helpful? Because I do recall multiple object training being a big part of that neurotrainer system setup.
Yeah, so there's we used to do it. Unfortunately, we had it as part of our company, but my former partner and I separated ways. But the Cognizant's NeuroTracker, which you're talking about, the D2 Dynavision board, the Synaptic, the glasses, that all of that equipment. If this is just my personal bias, 25 years ago, I came out with power skating for goalies and I got laughed at. And then, 15 years ago, I brought out the idea of every goalie should be doing some type of form of yoga. And I got laughed at, when I brought that up. I personally feel, guys, that if a goalie's not doing some form of vision training, that they'll get left behind. Because the great thing with all of that equipment is there's no guesswork. We can literally objectively measure how well your brain and your eyes are processing things. So there's a few places here in Edmonton that do offer I call it cognitive perceptual. I don't really like the word vision training because a lot of people miss that the cognitive component, the brain part of it. And so that's why I like to call it cognitive perceptual. And I think if you're going to be an elite goalie, I think just the nature of the game, this is another area that most goalies should be doing, and they're not. And they can really develop their confidence, because if they're processing, seeing things more automatically their confidence level is going to go up.
Okay, John, we've heard it from Braden and we've written about it here at InGoal before, but we've got you on the line, so we really need to hear from you. Tell us about the water bottle, the squirting of the bottle between plays in the NHL. What's Braden doing there? What's Carter doing there?
In essence, learning how to get back into the present moment. So, ironically, the title of our mental training tour this summer is what we call playing out of your mind. And so, Carter and Braden would have a tendency to get stuck in their head. They'd be thinking, they'd have thoughts or images of the goal getting by them. So when they shoot that water up into the air, one, they're literally getting out of their head and they're getting out of the past, and they're literally just tracking that water all the way from the moment it leaves to the moment it hits the ice. And it's just their way of getting back into the moment. I've had other goalies where they take a skate into the corner and they feel the wind against their face. And it's just their way of being able to mentally let go of the past and regroup and get back into the moment. And that's one of the things that we do at the workshop. It's what we call the 3R routine: recognize, regroup, and refocus. And that's just their way of regrouping and getting their mind back into the game.
Okay, I got one more for you on the Holtby Carter Hart thing. And we've seen it with other goalies around the league. But when we see Braden come out before a game, long before a game, he sort of leans on a stick, sets his head, and darts his eyes back and forth. And I've talked to him about it before, but he tells me he finds 2 different points on a rink board, and then he moves back and forth at different speeds. I always thought of it as vision. Is it a combination of vision and cognitive as well? What's the process there?
Well, I've never had a chance to talk to Connor Hollybuck, because you'll see that he does it as well.
Right.
I know some goalies are doing it for pure vision. Braden definitely is doing both. So when you see him on the bench doing it, he's literally running through his mind different odd man rushes that are coming down on him, different rushes. So he's not only doing it to develop the peripheral, but at the same time, he's running mental imagery, different teams and different options. That's what he's doing and same with Carter. That's what they're doing. They find that by combining both, they're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Okay, and from the vision side, it's just more warming. He's talked about this with us as well. It's just the eyes are a muscle. You got to warm them up as well as you do any other muscle in the body.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Nice.
So, John, you've teamed up on these seminars with Pete coming up. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about them and how people can register for them?
Well, I'm really honored to work with Pete Fry. He's just the most passionate, and he really wants to make a difference in goaltenders' lives. And he just brings so many things to the workshop, particularly the visualization. He's the master at it. Kids are going to walk out of there knowing how to do, mental rehearsal and visualization. And they can go to the website goalieseminars.com, and it has all of the dates, or they can go to my website, zoneperformance.ca, and you'll see there's the services, you'll see a page that says goalie coaching, and they can, learn all the information about the workshop or, individual services that I provide. Basically, we're going to be going across several cities across Canada. The workshop on the Saturdays is for Adam and Pee Wee goalies. And then on the Sunday, it's for the older group, for the Bantam and up to the pros. And it's a full-day workshop. We're going from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. It's, basically an 8-hour day where we're going to go over these 7 C's. And again, like you said, I love how you mentioned it earlier, it's a workshop. They'll be working. And we encourage the parents, if the parents want to come in and see what we do, and even goalie coaches, if any of the goalie coaches would like to come in and learn about that part of the game, we want the goalie coaches there because we feel that this is something that's just not being addressed in Canada. And I think I'd like to get Canada back on top as being the experts in the world in terms of developing top-level goalies.
Oh, that's fantastic. John, I've been lucky enough to have my son work with Pete. I think he probably was even a novice when he first started doing some visualization before games. Pete is an incredibly enthusiastic guy, and I remember the first time he did it, I asked Matty, how did that go? And he said, well, it was kind of strange, and I guess it would be if you're only 6 or 7 years old, but it works. And after that, for the rest of the tournament we were in at the time, he insisted on listening to the tape of the pregame visualization every time. So, yeah, it does work. And I know Pete's had a lot of success with a lot of people, just as you have. And I certainly look forward to being at the seminar. We're going to be there on the Sunday, both myself and my son, and look forward to learning some great things from you and Pete.
Well, and Pete, talks a lot about like how you can, again, you mentioned it earlier, like how you can take this skill. Like I'm just as proud as I have a lot of goalies that are police officers now, that are surgeons, that are doctors, and they will come back and say, like, when we were in Millennium Place in Sherwood Park and you're teaching us visualization, well, I've been able to use that for my career now. And I'm just as proud of that as them, being goalies back in the day. So it's a skill, like I said, for a lot of the parents. Again, I personally believe that Pete and I are going to be teaching skills that they can, use for their life as well as their goaltending.
Perfect. That's well said, John. And I also wanted to just say thanks for your time. I know how little free time you have, how busy you are between the sports psychology training as well as working with other clientele through the zone performance in Edmonton, and with this coming up. So not to mention, like you said, visiting with Holtz and visiting with Hart, with Carter. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and we'll be sure to sort of pass along more of the information on the podcast and online, so parents and goalies and goalie coaches can all check out the tour when you guys hit the road.
I really appreciate being on your show, guys. Thank you so much. You guys do such a great job for getting information out to goalies in all of those areas. It's a great time to be a goalie.
Thanks, John. Look forward to seeing you in Vancouver.
Thanks again, guys.
That was a fun interview to listen to. We try and do these conversations with our guests, all three of us, with the subject. But sometimes it's good just to sit back and listen to you guys have these talking points and pick the brains of somebody like John Stevenson. And his journey is so unique because he was on the ice talking about goaltending and positioning and the physical side before he made this transformation over to the psychologist angle and the mental coach. And Braden, Holtby, and Carter Hart are his big proteges, but Hutch, I mean, this is a process that's involving with the average goaltender and the future goaltender. Yeah,
what a fascinating individual. I mean, he's not just somebody who is fascinated by the mental game and decided to become an expert. He is an expert on both sides of the game, both the goaltending technique and the mental side of the game as a registered psychologist. He doesn't just do sports psychology with goaltenders. He's actually fills his days with clinical work as well. So do you call him a Renaissance man of goaltending? A long conversation with John varies from the mental side of the game to nutrition, to sleep, to are you drinking enough water? I mean, the number of stuff that he gets into, he really is a student of the game, and it's a fascinating conversation. So I'm really excited to get the chance to sit down with John when he comes to Vancouver in a couple of weeks. He and Pete Fry, who's been a longtime friend of InGoal, himself very successful in the field, working with goaltenders at the junior and pro level, and now a number of younger goaltenders as well. So Pete and John teaming up, as they mentioned in the interview, are going to be bringing a number of workshops, real hands-on opportunities to learn more. And they'll be with us in Vancouver both on June 22nd and June 23rd. We're going to be there on the 23rd, the day after the draft. Really looking forward to learning with these guys. And then they're going to be taking that journey across the country. Toronto, they'll be in Montreal, they'll be in Halifax, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Ottawa, Winnipeg. So anybody listening in is going to have an opportunity to learn from the guys that really work with the best goaltenders on the planet. And I was thinking as we were talking, we've often been fascinated that parents are happy to drop $2,000 or more on a new set of pads and a little bit nervous about spending money on a helmet, as if that's not the feature item on the goaltending gear list. And we wonder why you don't put that $1,000 pro helmet at the top of your list, because the head is the most important thing to protect. Similarly, I think the head is the most important part of an elite goaltender. And why wouldn't somebody be investing in something that's going to make them a better goaltender on the mental side of the game? So really excited to see what both these guys have to offer. And look forward to having you guys, or at least one of you, with me there.
Well, to be honest, the true test is if he can fix me, he can fix anyone.
Well, that's what I was going to go with, Woody, is the real nugget here is down the road. If I can get John one-on-one and do a debrief with him on what he thinks of you two and what he got out of you two, not what you two got out of him.
Hey, I was amazed, though, in that interview, because we sort of handed him that question from one of the readers or listeners about a young kid who sort of goes Woody Snaptastic. And he said that was a good thing.
Yeah.
See?
And I was shocked. So, I mean, he was looking for the bright side of a difficult story, because he definitely didn't want a kid to be like that all the time. But
anger is your friend.
Yeah. So fascinating interview, wasn't
it? Yeah. Road rage. Use it as a positive. Get your own lane, make your own space.
He obviously doesn't have a young goaltender he has to buy $300 sticks for.
No. Mine like a steel trap to steal on your feet. It's time to segue over to our gear segment. Kevin's back on the road at the Hockey Shop, source of sports, thehockeyshop.com. Back together with Cam, reunited. It feels so good.
Welcome back to the basement of the Hockey Shop, source for sports, here in Surrey with Cam, and a couple-week break, buddy, to recover from TendyFest. We gave you a little downtime. We ran the interviews from TendyFest as our gear segment. I guess the question after such a massive undertaking and such a great day, have you recovered?
Yeah, I think so. I'm still kind of getting there, I believe. Still got some paperwork to go through and some dust still to kind of settle, but I'd say, yeah, after what has been a successful event for sure, I'd say it's been good to catch up on a little bit of rest.
And so we're going to get back to we're not going to go gear specific this week. We're not going to go brand specific. We're going to talk about it's funny, we have John Stevenson, who is the mental sports psychologist for Braden, Holtby, and Carter Hart, is one of our featured guests this week. And we talked about how the mental part of goaltending is one of the biggest parts, and yet it's one of the least trained quite often. What we're going to talk about today on gear, I think, is related. Skate blades, steel, replacements, options. The most important thing we hear from goalie coaches right up to the NHL. We got the draft here next week. One of the things they're all going to talk about is, can he skate? Your connection to the ice may be the most important part of your equipment, and yet I think a lot of us overlook it. We just kind of take what comes with the skate. We don't change the profile. We don't do custom radiuses. We just take it and we go, and sometimes we let it get a little thin and wear out. So let's start maybe. We can talk about different blade replacement options, but maybe let's start with custom profile and custom radius and the kind of things you guys do there, and some of the popular sort of goalie cuts that you see have evolved over the past couple of years with Cecil up in the skate sharpening shop.
Even to preface this a little bit, even before I started working here, a long time ago now it is, but I didn't know there was this many options that we do have that we will go through here, even for profiling and regards to steel. Heck, I didn't even know there was different hollows that I could go. I usually just threw my skates up there and hope the guy did the best. So, it's very common.
You've come a long way.
Yeah, surprise, right? It's very common that when we ask, because when we do our skate fittings here, we also sharpen them up for you and whatnot. It's very common for people to be like, I didn't even know there was an option. So it's becoming less and less prevalent, and the more informed you are, the better choices you can make. And you're right, it's extremely important. You need to be able to skate. So starting off in terms of profile options, there's three major ones that we recommend. We have a Pro Sharp machine, so it's done all by automation. In particular, again, this depends a little bit on what your specific needs are inside the net. Personally speaking, I recommend one that's called the Dual Profile. It's a 24-28. Basically, what it will do, it shaves material off in the front, so it tips you a little bit more onto the balls of your feet. Leaves the middle of the skate fairly flat, and then once you get to the heel, it shaves a little bit more off. Again, for rotation on the skate, anything on your post, you'll find you'll be able to catch your edge a little bit quicker.
So a little bit more, we tend to think of goalie skates as sort of a straighter blade along the bottom. This has got it's a little bit more, for lack of a better term, a little bit more rocker to it on the toe and even a little bit on the heel.
Correct, exactly. And now that one would probably consider the one right in the middle. Two other options that we offer. There's just a single profile, which is the 27-foot. Basically, it's just an improvement over the stock radius that would come on any set of steel.
And the stock radius on most steel is what?
Off the top of my head, you got me.
Oh, we stumped him. We'll have to look that up and add it in later.
Either way, what this will do will actually improve consistency for sharpeners from person to person. So the one thing with getting a profile, if you're taking your skates to a multitude of different sharpeners, the profile will unfortunately get screwed up very quickly. If you're taking to the same sharpener, it will stay, for the most part, remain consistent, but it usually is about 2-3 months, and then you have to get your skate reprofiled depending on how often you sharpen your skates.
That's like if you go to a guy where, like, it's my pet peeve when I go to other places, because sometimes I can't make it to see Cecil. It happens. You need an edge. You're in a jam. I won't name names, but you can just hear the guy grinding down on the heels every time, and like way too many laps over the blade, and just like way too much pressure at the toe and way too much pressure at the heel. And you go to a guy like that often enough, he's going to change your profile because he's not even across the front to the back of the skate. It's just the reality. If you've got skates and they're worn and you're way low on steel at the toe and the heel, that chances are that's part of what's been happening.
Correct. And that's a major asterisk to kind of all of this conversation is, again, you need someone that's consistently sharpening your skates, whether that's us or whoever you do go to. You
I recommend Cecil upstairs.
Just slide in a little bit there. That said, it's just that it can get mistaken, or again, like you said, pressure put in the wrong spots, and that can really toast the profile and create an even worse experience. So just kind of a small note that way. The last one that we do offer is they call it the goalie Sam. So basically, this takes what we do in the dual profile, the 24-28, and then even more takes it to a bit more of an extreme. So we're even more off the toe, even flatter midsection, and the same radius at the back, which is that 27-foot. This would be the most aggressive. Personally, I haven't tried it because after looking at the profile machine, it looks like a little bit much. But if you're looking for as much toe pitch as you can possibly get, this would be the way to go.
So you're going to feel that when you're on your skates, you're going to feel more pitch forward in that than you would in another one?
That's correct.
And, of course, that changes, too, from manufacturer to manufacturer. I'll say the one thing we've had a really good experience in the new CCM FT2 skate, the Jet Speed skate. We're in the process of testing it. Obviously, we got a full custom skate. Based on having the 3D scan done and having all that profile information sent to them. It's been a real positive experience. One thing that I've noted when we went back to our Bauer set, this isn't a criticism or one or the other, just a difference to highlight. For sure, a much more neutral pitch in the CCM, whereas the Bauer was more of that forward pitch. So you're going to a custom goalie profile may depend also on the brand you're in. If you, for example, were used to a Bauer and you find the CCM is more neutral than you might like, you could have a custom profile put on it and sort of find that balance back to what you were used to in the Bauer, or I guess in theory, vice versa as well.
That's correct, and that's a great point to highlight because you're 100% correct. The Vertex is pitched a little bit further forward than what comes stock on the FT2. So, again, if you're trying to find that comfortability level again, this is a great way to set it there. One thing I highly recommend, and they were at Tenny Fest, if Pro Shop's ever setting up some kind of demo event near you, take advantage of it and check out some of the different steels, because this is something you can kind of try, and you have to try it to like it. But the thing is that once you set it to a profile, we're grinding away steel, and to set it back, we're grinding away more steel. So from a fresh set of blades, we could be down to 3/4 left or even half left just after messing around with 4 or 5 profiles to find what you like. So take advantage of a demo day if you can.
Okay, well, we're gonna get to the aftermarket steel and things that you can add to your skates, different options, different steel. Let's start with stock though. Let's look at Bauer. We've had some great experiences in the Bauer 2S Pro skate. They changed their steel there, added a little more steel to it. I think ergonomically, they've told me that they probably, really the 1S was the right height. They've added some steel because goalies felt they just wanted more steel. Again, if you were putting a custom profile in it, just to have a little more left to get some more sharpenings out of, or to be able to put a profile in it. We've had a great experience there. Obviously, the FTT, I always say FTT. I can't. It's just FT2,
Tongue twister.
you idiot, Kevin. In the new CCM skate, again, a great experience there as well. There's a lot more steel on the toe and the heel, the way they've angled the holder up there. But the black edges. So walk me through those two and how they're separated maybe from the lower price point where you don't get the black steel. Anecdotally, our testers have noticed in both cases, the Bauer black steel and the CCM black steel, it feels like it cuts your sharpening needs about in half. I mean, obviously you can slam into a post and lose an edge in a hurry, especially if you're flailing around in the crease and jamming it up the way I do. But for the most part, it does feel like it almost doubles the length of your sharpening. And those are options. If you don't have it stock, you can get that black steel in an aftermarket blade as well.
Correct. So, yeah, there's a lot of information to cover from what you just said. And even rewinding back to your point where even Bauer said that was enough steel. Bauer said that, but general store feedback, even from us, for example, is it wasn't enough. I had guys trying to run 3 sets of blades because they were crushing through steel so quickly. So thus came the 3G Plus, which is now inherently taller than the 3G steel, which is stock original steel for the 1S. And then from that 3G Plus, then came the 5G Plus, which is now the black edge steel, which you see stock on the 1X, the 2X and 2S.
Yeah, we've got ours on the 2S. And like you said, like ergonomically, like again, you're right. We saw it at retail. We heard it from goalies. We experienced it when we tested 1S. We wanted more steel. But in terms of like actual biomechanics and the correct pitch and the correct attack angle, like they weren't chintzing out on steel in 1S is what I'm saying. They had figured that out. They had done the science on that, but then they recognized, hey, we may have hit the perfect sweet spot in terms of performance or how we think it should perform, but we need to give goalies a little more steel to play with, and they've definitely got that now, and the feedback has been really positive.
Exactly, and now within that, you touched on it a little bit before, that lasting edge of the 5G or carbon steel. Highly, highly recommended if it's something you haven't tried. I personally skate on it myself. My sharpening's cut down in half alone.
So it sounds about the same as us.
Yeah, at about 2 to 3 ice times a week, I'll go usually a month without sharpening my skates, whereas before it was about every 2 weeks. It holds its edge, fine. Even when I do hit a post, I actually find the edge is a bit stronger, whereas in previous steels, I would have beveled the edge really easily. I don't find that as much with that black edge steel so far. So nothing but good things.
Right? It's giving you it's basically designed to be harder on that edge and to maintain that edge a little bit longer. So anecdotally, what we say kind of makes sense to, what they say is the reason for switching to that. And obviously, again, you said too in the FT2 as well, that black edge steel is there on the XSG speed blade in their XSG black speed blade.
That's correct. And then, this is something that, again, where you're going to have to try on different skates and whatnot and find what's right for you. Now, that I would say those two steels between the CCM and the Bauer are comparable, so it's not like one's better than the other at that point. But that said, I do have other options, and I've got about 6 packs of steel here in front of me. I even still have a couple more options upstairs. We have steel for the old Vertex, like cowling skates for Bauer. I've still got steel for Graf skates, varying degrees for step, and as well as extreme step steel. Beyond that,
do you still have steel for like the old like Bauer, or sorry, not Bauer, sorry, the old Reebok cowling, like 20K, 9K? You still have steel for that?
I believe we still have a couple extra pairs upstairs. Yeah.
Ooh, shout out to Paul Drew, goaltending coach, who was with me at the Hockey Canada Program of Excellence goalie camp last week. We may have some help for you here. I'm just giving him a hard time because he's still rocking the old skates. Him, Devin Dubnyk, and John Gibson still rocking the old Reebok skates. So they're gonna need some replacement steel in the near future.
I got it. So beyond that, when we were talking about it, we touched on it quickly before. So say for the new Bauer skates in particular, I have tons of that 5G plus carbon steel in stock, ready to rock and roll for them. I also got the 3G, which is basically the same height as the 5G, just not carbon coated. Sorry, that's a 3G plus. And then I do have the original 3G for the 1S as well, but I don't have as many pairs of that left over because we've moved towards the 3G plus.
Because everybody wants taller and more steel to play with.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
So a couple other aftermarket brands have hopped on making steel as well. I do have some of the Titan blades, which at the time were the only other option for the Vertex edge holder. I bought one that's a mirrored edge, which is basically a polished steel. Similar concept to what was happening in the 5G carbon coated. It's just a way to, again, make that edge stronger, for example.
And then step steel, which is kind of the original aftermarket. Maybe I shouldn't say original, but it was certainly the one that gained the most notoriety, especially with the step steel extreme options that were, back in the day of those very low profile Reebok holders, giving you a better attack angle with the extreme. Step has been around a long time. What are the differences between step and Titan, whether it's in terms of cost or quality or option?
So what the step steel that we have for the Vertex edge holder in particular is actually something a little bit different. So what it does is it's actually a 4mm steel that snaps into the 3mm blade. So if you're finding you still want that thicker blade option, this is basically your only option to do that with a Bauer skate, to still kind of skate on a 4mm steel. It's something that we carry in stock.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize anybody was doing that, to be honest with you. I'm an old 4mm guy myself, and there are times, as a guy who likes it deep, 3/8, got a lot of weight to push around from my knees. What can I say? I need an edge. Put on a few LBs over the years. I found it easier to get it in a 4mm, and so I found that I've had to go, deeper in a 3mm to get the same type of feel, the same type of responsive edge. So having that option in step steel that's interesting to me. So that's the only one that makes that. Have they got that yet for CCM, or is it just strictly on that Vertex?
Right now, just strictly on the Vertex, but I'm sure they'll, once CCM start gaining more traction in that skate department, I would say once they gain a little bit more, I'm sure Step Steel will probably take a look at making something.
And if you're a goalie out there and you're wondering 4mm, 3mm, why did everyone go to 3mm? Why would that have changed? I think the biggest answer is weight. Right?
Yes.
You're essentially, it's one of the heaviest parts of a skate is the blade, and you're basically reducing that by a quarter.
One other way that I do describe it, though, is that you can think about it as like a fine edge knife point. The fatter that knife point edge is, in theory, more steel that's contacting the ice, more grab, but less glide, for example. So for me personally, I like to be able to shuffle across my crease very easily. On a 4mm steel, I always kind of dig in, and you really have to take a lot of effort to push through. But with the 3mm blade, I find I can slide through my edges quite easily. But when I go cut, because that edge point is finer, I still get all that cut and push off.
That's why Devin Dubnyk cringes when we go to shuffle drills and he's got those old Reebok skates with a big wide 4mm and a deep edge, and he's like, "Oh, these skates don't shuffle." That explains it. There, we've got it explained to us. Okay, so that's your custom options: the Titan, the step steel, also, like you said, aftermarket steel, and the XSG holder. So you can buy multiple sets. Same with the Bauer with the LS5. All those options are here. Now, are you seeing kids buy multiple sets of steel for one pair of skates so that they can come in, bring them in, have 3 sets sharpened, and not have to come in again until they've worn all 3 out?
That is a common play. Definitely see multiple edges of steel, so that way you can kind of flip through. For guys that do hit the post a lot, it's a chance to swap out their blades because of those quick swap blades now. You quickly grab a quick whistle, scale it over, swap them out. So, yeah, it's not uncommon to see, 2-3 sets of steel every time that a pair of skates get brought in.
Any beer leaguers doing that? Because that seems a little keen to me. We don't want to call anybody out here.
No, you know what? I'm sure there are a few. I haven't gone out of my way to go find them. Put it that way.
Okay. For the record, I don't, folks, and I have access to gear like crazy, and not even I am having multiple sets of steel. If I lose an edge, I just probably skate better, to be honest with you. Okay, perfect, Cam. Thank you for this. All the different steel options, all the different profile options, as usual. If you want more information on it, you can visit them at the Hockey Shop Source for Sports here in Surrey in person. Come talk to Cam. We haven't had him on for a couple weeks, so his head's back down to its normal size, not too big. Make sure you see Cecil up in the skate shop. If you got any other questions or you want to order online, you can contact them. Check out the website at thehockeyshop.com. Or if you want to phone in and talk to somebody in person who understands goaltending, you can get them at
604-589-8299.
There's the radio voice from Cam Matwiv for Cam and Kevin from the Hockey Shop, and episode 21 of InGoal Radio podcast brought to you by the Hockey Shop Source for Sports. Cam, thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks, Cam.
Good stuff. We've heard about the sticks and the pads. We've talked so much about the upper body and trying to conform to the regulations of the National Hockey League. But the steel part, Woody, like it's blown up. What, in the last 5 years?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of when Danny Taylor, because I do think that Step Steel and the Step Steel Extreme products were kind of what first brought this to the attention of goaltenders a little more. Danny Taylor, obviously, when the Calgary Flames signed him to a contract, he was playing in the American Hockey League here in Abbotsford using Reebok cowlings with the Step Steel Extreme blade, and that was a lot of steel, and the NHL actually made it illegal. They said you can't use those. And I do think
made you taller, right?
Yeah,
it was higher off the ice.
But the irony now, of course, is, and the irony a little bit, frankly, there are people who rail against Step Steel and the Step Steel Extreme product, and I get it. It's way too tall. But the irony is, in the meantime, with taller holders, there are products out there that are a lot taller than that setup that Danny Taylor had and have a lot more aggressive attack angle. As a matter of fact, most stock skates now for goalies have as aggressive or more aggressive and are as taller than that original Step Steel Extreme was on his Reebok cowling, which had a lower profile. So I think that's where it kind of started. Step Steel at the time was increasingly popular in the NHL outside of the Extreme product. Goalies were using their standard product, which was still like 3-4 millimeters taller than regular steel. Gave you a little more bite, a little more attack angle. And this just became a conversation that became common around goaltending. Equipment companies have done a great job adapting it into their product. We talked with Cam about the Bauer, the evolution from the 1S to the 2S and the 2X in terms of making that steel a little taller, giving goalies more room to work with in terms of sharpening, lasting, custom profile. Again, the conversation is there. It's gotten better, but much like John Stevenson and the mental side of the game, I do think for a lot of parents and a lot of goaltenders, it's the last thing they think about, and it's the most important thing in a lot of regards because it is your connection to the ice. And if you can't move in today's game, you can't play.
How often do you sharpen your skates, Woody?
Every time I go to the hockey shop and Cecil wants to tune me up.
Yeah.
I'm probably, when I'm playing 3 or 4 times a week, I'm probably sharpened every week to week and a half.
Wow. How about you, Hutch?
Yeah, I'd say similar. And the little guy who's a little more finicky than me, he would honestly tune them up every ice session if I'd let him. He notices the difference. So
probably go through a couple of sets of blades a year then.
And I haven't, but I should be more careful about that. I still remember Kevin.
Because you get used to it, right? Like it's a gradual
No,
thing
for
where
sure. Kevin, I still remember when we started back in this 10 years ago or so, a couple of stories about Lou and I think Jonathan Quick and how frequently they swapped their steel and how they could notice if somebody went back to old stuff on them as well, right?
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. This is how this conversation started because at a time when we started to look for taller steel, when goalies started to have that conversation, one of the other conversations we were having with regulars in the NHL was how frequently they replaced their steel to get taller steel, like just out of stock steel, because the sharpening was wearing it down,
Right.
and that they noticed the difference. And Lou's a guy who, he's an older school guy, and that he was in Reebok skates up until 2 years ago. That same ones, think of like the 9K, the 20K, that program with the full cowling, really low profile. Go find a picture of Devin Dubnyk. He's still wearing them. John Gibson still wearing them. Corey Crawford up until this past, I think, season and a half or 2 seasons, he switched into a CCM more updated skate, but he was in the Reeboks. Just a really low profile skate. Lou switched to the true 2-piece, had a little groin, he had some groin issues with it last year. It changes everything. When you go from that lowest profile possible Reebok to one of the tallest skates available, the true 2-piece, you're changing everything in terms of what muscles are activating to make a push, where you're engaging those muscles in your push, butterfly recoveries. But man, he'll never switch back. I've got that audio. I've got video of it when I was with him on the ice in Florida last August, just talking about how much better and easier his recoveries were in the new steel, in the new skates. He never slips out. Whereas in the past, that used to be a problem. So it's definitely a conversation that started at the NHL level with guys just constantly putting new steel in their skates, and companies recognized that there was an opportunity there to give them even more of an edge by giving them even more steel, and it's evolved from there.
More steel. Does it give you more room, more vulnerability in an RVH if you're putting your foot right against the post for a puck to slide through there?
Skate on post.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen that a ton of those goals. It's not just the taller steel in that case. It's the no cowling, taller holders. In some cases, the gap is much bigger than a puck, and it basically becomes a ramp. If it's on the ice against the post, it can be a little ramp, and there's definitely enough space. We've seen a lot of big goals over the past couple of years in the playoffs, banked in from dead angles or below the goal line, hitting that skate, hitting the bottom of the pad and banking in, or just finding that hole. So it's one of the issues with post integration that we've seen talked about a lot in the NHL. If you're using skate on post with new skates, that gap is something you need to be mindful of, because it's definitely big enough to have a puck go through. And we've seen some really costly pucks sneak through over the past couple of seasons.
And Hutch, before we wrap this thing up, some great listener questions that you passed along to John Stevenson. And if people want to query us, how do they get in touch with us?
Darren, we'd love to hear from all our listeners at podcast@ingoalmag.com. That's podcast@ingoalmag.com.
You don't have to send a letter. You can just send us an email, which makes it a lot easier to get a hold of somebody like Dusty Emu. Woody?
Yeah, quick congratulations to Dusty Emu. He was in the news this week. Actually had a heads up this was coming before it became public. I knew he was considering it. Big move for him. Big loss for the LA Kings, frankly. He played a big role in resurrecting the careers of Peter Budaj and Jack Campbell in the past year. Obviously, he had played a big part in getting the recruiting and early development of Cal Peterson, who looks like a real good future NHLer for them. He's off to China to coach in the KHL. Better deal, better offer there. He took it. And just, he's a fascinating guy, a guy I've gotten to know and enjoyed talking to over the years. And we're going to make sure, he's also happens to share a hometown with me here in White Rock, on the border just below Vancouver. And we'll make sure we get together for a coffee real soon and hit and bang out a podcast here. Cause his story, playing for Japan in the 98 Olympics, becoming a goaltending coach, with the Winnipeg Jets and then the LA Kings, the success he's had there, the playing career, playing with his son as an emergency backup in his son's first start, Jonah, in the American Hockey League. There are so many good stories that Dusty Emu has to tell. So we'll make sure we get him on the podcast in the very short future. But for now, just a congratulations to him on a great opportunity to go to China and play a role. Much like he was in Japan for the 98 Olympics, he has an opportunity now. It's not just the KHL. He has an opportunity to help play a role in the goaltenders who are going to play for China at the next Olympics in Beijing.
Sounds like you guys just go for a coffee date and hang out and talk goaltending. Look forward to that and say hi to Dusty, because he is one of the great characters of the game with all those experiences. Thanks to John Stevenson for passing along his knowledge and this episode 21, Camp at the Hockey Shop. Nice to have you back. Next week, a round table of goalie coaches from that Hockey Canada camp, all three of which played in the National Hockey League. Jason LaBarbera, Danny Sabrin, and Freddie Brathwaite, all with a conversation with Woody. And the best part, the most amazing part, is Woody was not the most talkative person in the segment. I'm not going to tell you who was, but he was not the most talkative. That's all coming up next week. Thanks for listening. Without you, we're just talking to ourselves, and that's not fun at all. Trust me on that one. Click your likes on your podcast provider. It helps us out a great deal. Think of it as a stick tap to InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by The Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com.